Hi, and welcome to Schmooze with Suze. I'm Suze Montgomery, your host, and today we've got somebody that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure he will be. He's actually come to speak to my classes twice now, once today and once a couple weeks ago. And then he writes a newspaper column. So if you read the Ventura County Star, you read Woody Woodburn. So we are going to talk about Woody's life and somebody special that he was very close to in a book that he has actually published. So Woody, we know a little bit about you and your background and you grew up in, but maybe I do, but most of the people at home don't. So you grew up where?
First of all, thanks for asking me to schmooze with you.
Well, you're welcome.
It's fun to be here. And well, I was born in Ohio, but I grew up in Ventura from age 12 on.
Okay, so you're like literally a native.
I'm kind of a local, yeah.
Okay, and your family, how did you get to Ohio to Ventura though?
My dad is a doctor, and when his father passed away, he decided he had no roots left in Ohio that were really keeping him there, because he didn't have any brothers or sisters. And he had a really good friend from medical school, Dr. William Hart, who lived in Ventura and said what a great place this is to work. And so my dad brought the family out here to work.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a culture shock though. But you were like a preteen, tweener or
12
whatever.
years old, and you know, when you grow up in the snow and you're 12 or 13 and 14 like my brothers, you get a chance to come to California, it's like, we're for it, Dad.
But you're still uprooted from your buddies. Isn't that a critical time for kids?
It is, I think, but I mean, also it was really exciting. If you're not from California, California is a pretty cool place to come to. It's, you know, I mean, kids are elastic, so I think instead of looking at the friends you're losing because you stay in touch with them anyway, I'm still great friends with a lot of my friends from Ohio. It would have been easier with Facebook.
Yeah,
nowadays
definitely.
It'd be really easy.
Social.
But I think the pros outweighed the cons of staying, so here we are.
So you went to local schools?
I went to Buena High and then UC Santa Barbara.
Okay,
And
majored in?
I majored in business economics.
Wait a minute.
Yep.
Where did you make a left turn?
Well, so I went to UCSB basically because both my brothers went there and they loved it, and I would go visit them. And so I said, this is a school for me. I don't know what I want to study. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor and go into medicine like my grandfather, my father, and both my brothers are all surgeons.
Wait a minute.
So all I
the
knew
whole
is
family are docs and you're not?
That's right. So I'm the black sheep. I just knew I didn't want to do that. So I went to UCS Santa Barbara. You have to declare majors. So I declared, they didn't just have business, so I did business econ. And then 2 years in, I hurt my back. I played on the tennis team, so I couldn't play tennis anymore. So I saw an ad in the Daily Nexus, the newspaper, says we need a sports writer. I go, I'm going to do that. So I went and I just loved it. And so since I didn't have a journalism major at UCSB, I didn't want to transfer because I loved it too much there. I just loaded up on as much English classes, as many English classes as I could get, and kept working on the newspaper there. And
you must have had some natural ability, though, to be able to write.
English was always my strong suit.
Okay,
writing,
so
yeah.
you really loved it.
Yeah, my mom was an English teacher in elementary
there's
school.
a motivation
so, yeah.
for that. That's interesting. The whole family were docs.
Yeah, and my grandfather, who was a country doctor, he was really into poetry, and he wrote just for his own. So I think there's a little bit of genes passed on. My dad can't write worth a lick, and my brothers I don't think can either. But so I think there's a little bit passed down to me.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
how was that received? I mean, they probably were happy you were just doing anything.
You know, my dad never pushed us, my brothers or anybody in medicine. He almost discouraged us from going into it because he just, sometimes when you're in a profession, you know all the downfalls from it.
Oh, sure.
Kind of like my daughter Dallas has wanted to be a writer ever since she was 3 or 4 years old. She'd borrow my laptop and type fun stories or whatever. And I always encouraged it, but I always said, you should go into writing novels or whatever, but I don't want you going into newspapers because I kind of saw the handwriting on the wall that newspapers, it just isn't always the best profession unless you're called for it. Same with medicine. So if you discourage somebody from it and they still go into it, that means they're going into it for the right reasons.
Okay, so yeah, you don't have to be motivated otherwise.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you started writing locally?
So after I graduated, I went to 29 Palms, California.
Why?
I did the longest 3 years of my life, but it was only 6 months working there. My wife and I we were newlyweds, and I think we were about the only people that weren't on the military there.
Wow.
Yeah, so I worked there. That's because that's where I got my first job, and then from there I went to Paso Robles for 2 years, Santa Maria for 2 years, and then down here.
Boy, you definitely made improvements along the way.
I always just went to a bigger and bigger paper, yeah. And I actually left the Star for 3 years to work down in LA for 3 years, and then I came back.
Where'd you work in LA?
The Daily Breeze. Torrance.
The Daily Breeze.
Yeah.
So that's like a small newspaper like we have out here?
It was bigger than the Star, but I got to cover just like LA sports there, so that was the attraction for me to go there when I was a sports columnist.
Why'd you go into sports?
I just love sports, yeah.
I mean, still, are you like a crazy person on weekend that watches every game?
No, in fact, even when I was covering that, I wasn't crazy about sports. I mean, crazy sports, because when you're in the press box, as they say, it's kind of like unwritten rule, no cheering in the press box.
I don't know that.
Yeah, so it's funny because you're not even rooting for, you don't care about any team, you're just rooting for a good story. So like,
wow.
As a writer, you just want a good story to write about. And the one thing you also don't really want, even though it's a good story, if it's an evening game, is you don't want overtime, because sometimes you go into overtime, your deadline is before the game is over, and you have to file, and so you're just calling your editor, I can't file, and it was like, we need it. So
I never put that together.
Yeah.
So how do you develop? Say, for example, you're in the press box and you're watching the game.
Oh, sure. You're
so
watching and taking
watching
notes.
and taking notes at the same time.
And you're typing. You might be typing 2 different story angles at the same time, because the story could go either way when you're on a tight deadline. If you have a longer deadline, then it's less pressure, and you can craft more of a story. So I really preferred either day football games for college or whatever, or when I write a day later where I could go into the locker room and really interview someone for more of a feature piece. That's what I like human interest.
Because you're known for your human interest
Right.
pieces.
Right.
So did you do mostly that when you were sports writing, or did you just actually cover the game?
The big games, even that, I wouldn't do a game story. I would do a column on it, but a column I could focus on one aspect of the game or one person. So the next day stories would usually just be like really big events, like if I go to the Super Bowl, NBA Finals. But other than that, I would try to go to a game a day before I had to write, so I'd have a day to write, and I could take my time in the locker room, get what I really needed.
So you really had a well-rounded education by doing that, which has evolved into what you do now, which is your weekly column,
Right.
Human Interest.
Exactly.
So now, for example, when you write a column, how do you write your column every week? I mean, do you just sit there and whip it out, or do you have to sit there and agonize?
I'd like to say I whip it out, yeah.
But you agonize?
Yeah, usually I don't even know what I'm going to write about until the day it comes up a lot of times. But as Red Smith was a great sports columnist, he was he won a Pulitzer Prize. He used to say, when people ask him, do you worry about what you're going to write next? He goes, God is good, God will provide. There's always a topic always comes up.
So but you find so many interesting human interest stories.
Right.
And you focus generally on a theme.
Right.
Okay.
And you get into a rhythm. Like when I was writing 3 columns a week, you get into a rhythm, and so you're always thinking ahead. And people ask me, what did you write about yesterday or something? And a lot of times it's like, what did you have for dinner 2 days ago? I forget, because I'm focusing on the next.
Oh, you're just preparing for old age right now. Yeah, because I ask my students, they say, well, I forgot that. And I sat there and go, well, it's your short term. But yours would be overload, or maybe just too much information.
Right. And sometimes there's just too many things to write about, and sometimes it seems like there's nothing, but something always comes up. Like today I was just visiting you with some of your students, and I filed away, like, I'm going to come visit you on a Wednesday sometime, because that garden that not only you built, but 20 members of the community donated, and now your students are growing, are gardening, and then they get to eat it. It's a fabulous story. Talk about it takes a village.
It's community.
Yeah.
And that's community.
But that's what
for
touches
you
me, and I like to write about things that touch me, and I think if it pleases me, touches me, I feel like it's going to please some of the readers.
So, okay, personal perspective. Generally, if you write from a personal perspective, you're spot on.
I think so, and also, even if you're not spot on, at least I think the worst would be if you tried to please somebody else and it didn't please you, and then it still fails. At least if you please yourself and it fails with others, you have yourself to blame and you're still happy with what you did.
That's probably true to a lot of degree. Okay, let's use the analogy on that one. My husband is a journalist,
Sure.
but he also does acting because he really loves it and he's really good at it. And I've noticed the roles that he's best in, he's always good, but the roles he's best in are something that at least has an element of himself in that role. And then it's so genuine, it's almost like it's effortless.
Right.
Would that be the same thing with yours?
It's not very often it's effortless, but
So you struggle?
Oh yeah, I mean,
But it looks so, just flows.
Well, people ask me how long does it take you to write, and it's how long do I have? I mean, I couldn't tell you how many rewrites I do on each column. And one of the neat things about my daily column, my weekend column that's non-sports, is when I was writing sports, I would write, when I first came into the business, like a 900-word column.
Right.
And then it got down to about 850 and maybe 800, and sometimes I could go longer. But now, because I'm on the op-ed page and they just have a space for me, I'm capped at 700 words max. I can't go even 701.
Oh.
So I'm used to writing 1,000 words,
Yeah.
whatever. So it's actually been wonderful, though. It's been a challenge of, I still write like 1,000 my first draft, and then it's just cutting it down, and you just cut out everything that's, it's like the sculptor, you know, how do you sculpt that? Well, I chipped away everything that didn't look like Beethoven or whatever you're sculpting. And you just have to make every word count. And I really honestly think that my 700 word columns are better than they would be if they let me write 800 or 900 words.
No kidding.
I mean, I can't go off into 3 themes. I have to focus on one theme, but I have to just make it count. So it's a fun challenge, and I really feel I've learned from it.
Let's talk about your book here. I mean, this is, let's start at the very beginning. This is for at home, John Wooden. If you don't know who John Wooden is, I don't know where you've been. But John Wooden, tell us how you met him and first of all, who he was.
Well, Coach Wooden was arguably not just the greatest basketball coach in history, but some people say the greatest coach, period. Although he preferred to be called a teacher than a coach. But I met Coach after he'd retired. I was a rookie in Santa Maria. I was covering a talk he gave in San Luis Obispo. And after he spoke to about 300 businessmen, I waited until it was my turn. I wanted to ask him if I could have an interview. And afterwards, he spent about 45 minutes just shaking hands with everybody that was there and speaking to him for a little bit. So finally, everybody was taken care of, and I go, Coach, you know, you have 10 minutes to give me an interview. And he lived in Encino, so he had a 4-hour drive ahead of him.
Wow.
And he couldn't give me 10 minutes. He gave me an hour, a full hour of one-on-one talk.
What a generous man.
Yes, and that's Coach Wooden. So then I sent him a copy of my column, and a few days later, I get a return letter in the post office, and I see his return address. I'm just thrilled. I couldn't believe it. Writes me this just really nice, thankful note. I haven't received thank you notes for columns I've written for more than, you know, a couple dozen people in my whole career. It's really rare. And anyways, at the bottom he said, if you're ever in town, give me a call and we'll go for a morning walk together. Because he used to walk 4.5 miles every morning. He was 76 years old.
You must have really touched him.
Yeah, I don't know, but so I called him that night before he forgot who I was. And I was like really nervous, like if I was in middle school, I'm calling a girl for a date. but I call him up and we made plans that Saturday, and I show up, 7 o'clock sharp, and we go on a walk. And it just built from there. We had walks and talks and phone calls and letters, and he just became a mentor and friend and like a grandfather figure to me, and then had a big role on my children as well.
But how did this occur from one simple walk into this long-time friendship? I mean...
Well, I think maybe we on our walk, one thing that happened, about halfway through the first 2 miles, I'm just peppering him with basketball questions, and he's answering them politely. He's a great storyteller, but about halfway through, he turned the tables and started asking me things. And one of the things I mentioned, I was a newlywed, and that my wife and I had our first child we were expecting. He goes, oh, when is Lisa due? And I said, August 8th. And he just stopped in his tracks, and you could just see emotion wash over his face, and literally tears welled up. I mean, I haven't really seen that very often in a person. He just goes, that was Nell's and my anniversary.
Oh my gosh.
Nell was his wife, that they were married almost 50 years before she passed away, 3 years prior. And that was the only girl he ever kissed, ever dated since elementary school.
Seriously?
So we had that connection right there. My daughter Dallas was born a few months later, actually. She was 3 months premature, weighing 2 pounds 6 ounces. Ooh. His first great-grandchild was born just a few months before Dallas, and she had childhood diabetes, so she came in the world tough. I'm from the Midwest, Ohio. He's from Indiana, so I think there's just a lot of connections. And hopefully it's just, you know, he saw something in me, I guess, maybe that he saw worthy of giving me friendship.
Himself.
That's the highest honor I can imagine.
Maybe, yeah, you know, he just connected with you on so many levels.
But just so many lessons he taught me in the next 23 years before he passed away are
You had 23 years with him?
23 years of friendship, yeah.
How often did you get to see him?
I didn't try to overuse the privilege. Like, we would talk on the phone and letters, and then I would visit him just every now and then for a walk. And then one magical time, I took both my kids to see him, Dallas and Greg. They were 10 and 8 at the time. And he kept asking me, I could have taken them sooner, and I'm glad that I didn't, because they were old enough to appreciate it, because now they still recall meeting him for 2 hours. Like, they knew about him because he would always ask about them, and he wrote them letters sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, and he's always asking about them, and so they got to know him, and they remember that, and they always say that that's one of the most special days of their whole life. so far.
They weren't overcome with the celebrity of this
no, I mean,
major figure?
He was just like a grandfather. I mean, they walked in and 10 minutes later, they're both sitting on his lap, and you'd think it was their own great-grandfather.
How wonderful.
And he's just telling them stories, and like he talked, 3 minutes of basketball with them, and everything else was just talking about his family and growing up. And he had this stuffed bear. He called it the self-esteem ape. And he leaves ape. So he leaves and brings back this little gorilla stuffed. It's wearing a red vest and a red bow tie, and he gives it to the kids. He says, squeeze its paws, and they squeeze its paws, and he goes, "You're brilliant," or it says, "You're fabulous. That's a great idea. Terrific." And my kids they're 8 and 10. They're just busting up, and I'm trying not to laugh. It's hilarious. And Coach just looks at me, and he just kind of like winks and smiles, and then he goes on to tell them, he goes, "I call this the self-esteem ape. My daughter Nan gave it to me, and all of us, even me, we all sometimes feel a little low and need our self-esteem picked up."
And this
what a
simple
great
toy.
lesson!
What
Yeah,
a simple toy.
He saw what we saw as a toy. He saw as a teaching tool, and then, he was known as the Wizard of Westwood. And after that, I always kidded him. He was the self-esteem wizard.
How
At least
many
on
years
that day
did he
was.
coach?
He coached 32, I believe, at UCLA.
That's
It took him, I
amazing.
think, 16 to win his first NCAA title there. And he goes, "I was a slow learner, but once I learned something, I kept it," because he won 10 titles in a row, 10 titles in the next 12 years, 7 of them in a row.
Well, there were so many stories, and I've read over the years in different columns, not necessarily sports columns. I don't do sports. If there's anything that I don't read in a newspaper, it's the sports. I read the want ads before I read sports columns. I'm sorry. It's
That's
just,
all right.
And my husband, that's his territory. He loves to read that, but I read everything else, and I'm a news hound like you probably still are today. I read like 20 newspapers a day. I'm always looking for information for class.
Sure.
And I'm always gleaning research more and more. But I remember this one story, and I think even John told me about this story, about how Coach had these young guys that were brand new. Do you know the story I'm going to tell?
I think I know.
You tell it better than I do.
Talking about shoes?
About the shoes,
Tying the
yeah.
shoes on
Tell
for-
this shoe story.
The first day of practice every year, even when he had All-Americans, Bill Walton, Lou Alcindor, coming back that have won 3 NCAA titles, the first thing a day he'd do at practice was teach them how to put their sock on. You have to pull it on and then hold it and smooth it out. You don't want any wrinkle on your sock. And you put your shoe on while you're holding your sock tight. And then you tie your shoe snug and you tighten it over the eyelet so it won't loosen. You double knot it. And you want them to buy their shoes a half size too small, not too big like.
Why?
Or big like my dad when I was growing up, so you have room to grow in,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because if your toe's touching already, when you come to a jump stop, your foot's not going to slide, and if your foot doesn't slide, you can't get a blister.
Oh.
Now, if you put your sock on with the wrinkle, he said, you're going to get a blister. If you get a blister, you have to come out of the game when I don't want you to come out. That means a substitute comes in when he's not supposed to.
Right.
You're hurting the team. It's kind of like the kingdom's lost for a nail in the horseshoe.
Right.
So that's where he started from. He's total fundamentals. And it's funny that the All-Americans, I would talk to them later as they're adults, Bill Walton. They'd laugh at that, they'd snicker behind the thing, and then they become fathers and they're bringing their kids to Coach Wooden's house to have them teach the kids how to put their shoes and socks
Really?
on. He taught Greg and Greggy Dallas and Greggy how to do it. Oh yeah.
No kidding.
But and same with his Woodenisms, like be quick but don't hurry, don't mistake activity for achievement. These little Woodenisms, the players would think they're hokey and stupid. And
They're
then,
life lessons.
but then when they become parents, they come back and they're having the kids learn them from Coach Wooden too. It's kind of like Mark Twain said, he went away to college. His dad was just such an imbecile. And he comes home 4 years later and he goes, "It's amazing what the old man learned in 4 years." And I always think of that when the players would tell me how much they've learned.
I'm older than you, but
Yeah.
this is something that makes me laugh because I find myself saying things that my mother used to say, and I can remember when I was younger going, "I'm never going to say that. I'm never going to be like my mother. I want to be totally different. I'm going to be my own person." And boy, she's a little,
Yeah.
off there. But I find myself saying things and I go, "My God, where did that come from? It's my mom."
Yeah.
And you find yourself doing that, but with Coach Wooden, that's wisdom. Not
Right.
that my mother wasn't wise.
But when anybody's 18 or 19 or 20, the older
everything.
generation.
Oh, yeah.
And when I came into his life, I'm 27. I mean, I was just a sponge. So everything he said was the gospel to me. He's, just the biggest idol in my life. He's just an amazing person. So to get to know him and have this relationship with him. So when I would give talks, just when I was a sports columnist at Rotary, Lion Club and stuff, afterwards, the questions people, Q&A, they always want to hear more about Coach Wooden. And then they would say, you know, you should really write a book about Coach Wooden. And like a lot of important things, I just kept putting it off and putting it off. And then when he passed away 3 years ago, I go, I have to do this. You know, not just for myself is important and for my kids to have this book, but his friendship was such a gift to me. I felt I owed a gift to him to share his wisdom and his lessons with as many people as possible. So like, they can't be friends with him, but in a way they can be, because
he still lives on in your book.
And like one of the lessons I talk in there is he turned everyday occurrences into lessons. So one time I'm leaving, he goes, just a second. He goes to the study, comes back, and he gives me a book he just had written and came out. And I go, Coach, I can't take this. You're always giving me something. I'm going to buy this on my way home today. He goes, well, Woody, I can't really give it to anybody else. I've already signed it to you.
Aww.
And so, you know, it's kind of a funny story, but it doesn't end there. Of course, he paused and he goes, but I'll tell you what, on your way home today, I want you to buy another book anyway and just give it to a friend for no reason. And it's one of his things is make friendship a fine art. And so that story's in there. I've been just so pleasantly surprised and rewarded and felt great that I've gotten so many letters and people writing asking to order more books. They bought one and they go, I want to give one to a friend, or one person bought 20, I want to give 20 to a bunch of friends. And one guy bought 60 books to give to his friends and people at his work, just for no reason. It wasn't Christmas time or anything.
Was he impressed?
And that just touched me, because it's like definitely Coach Wooden's lessons are getting passed on.
Well, he is you and you are he.
I have a lot of them in me just because I want to.
You
I emulate him.
spend time with him. He was a part of your formative years. When you know, all of this adds up to who he is and who you are. I mean, where can you buy this locally?
Great question. I love people to buy. I love to support local bookstores. So in Camarillo, Mrs. Figg's Bookworm is great.
Okay.
Bank of Books in Ventura. I think Barnes & Noble can order it for you. You can always order it at Amazon.com or WoodyWoodburn.com. I'll be glad to mail one to you and autograph it.
Oh, good. We'll probably put that at the bottom of the screen, so
my
at the end of the show.
WoodyWoodburn.com.
Okay, so they can get a hold of you there too.
Buy one for a friend. That'd be awesome.
Mine's autographed. I've got my autographed copy. Make today your masterpiece. That was one of his sayings.
Yes, that's my favorite saying of his. In fact, his Corey, his first great-granddaughter that I talked about that was born about when Dallas was, she became a school teacher, and Coach was one. People ask, like, you know, could he coach people today? And I go, yeah, he could, but he didn't like the tattoos at all, and he didn't like the showmanship, the dunks. But
how about the jewelry?
No, but she actually got a tattoo, and it says, "Make my day your masterpiece." But
no kidding.
She got it where she can cover it with her wristwatch, and so he wasn't too upset about it.
I bet, because he's old school.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't feel like he's gone, because I stumble upon pieces of him in my reading, because he's quoted often.
He is.
And he's kind of a, you know, he's an iconic figure still to this day.
He really is. What's really amazing is when I've been giving talks since the book came out, it's so amazing to me that afterwards, so many people in my audiences, there's always at least 2 or 3 that had an encounter with him, whether it was at a restaurant, in a hotel lobby, out in public, even at a basketball game. And they'll share their story, even if it's like 15 seconds, like, you know, he said hi to me, shook my hand, or in 15 seconds, like at that first talk where he gave and these businessmen come up, he could make you feel one-on-one that this moment mattered, and it's a moment these people carry with them the rest of their lives. Just 10 and 15 seconds. That's an amazing genius that someone has.
It is a genius, it's a gift.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I've only met one other person like that, believe it or not, was Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton had the ability to look you straight on like this, and there was no periphery. You know how you're talking to someone, you're looking over their shoulder or whatever. You get distracted by movement. It's a typical kid thing, but people do this all the time. Yeah. And Bill Clinton was able to do this. I don't know if it was practice in the coaches, that was probably just natural to him.
Right.
Clinton, who knows? But he was able to do this little focus thing here. And
Coach could remember someone's name, and he met him, and he'd remember it 5 or 10 years later. But he had this great memory. He was always memorizing poetry, so any occasion he would break into just a long poem. It was just amazing, and it's always for the perfect occasion. And he could deliver it so wonderfully. So I mean, I could just sit in his living room and just listen to him talking. Like, he would ask me questions. I preferred to have him do the talking, you know.
Boy, your life is enchanted. You know that?
Oh,
you're blessed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great wife, great kids. Boy, you made it.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be your friend.
Oh, I'm proud to be yours.
And thank you for being on our show.
It's been my pleasure.
I appreciate it. Anytime you want to come back and come and sit in my class and audit what I do and give me pointers. I need
you
pointers.
keep making the community a better place as
Absolutely.
you keep doing.
One more time, guys. Either you see the information at the bottom of your screen, please do yourself a favor and buy some, not only for yourself, but do it for other people you know, because this is great information and it's a great life remembered. Make every day.
Make each day your masterpiece.
There you go. Thanks, Woody, for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week.